My question is, as a newly certified BCBA with a passion for learning and supporting kiddos with autism to reach their greatest potential, what resources would you recommend to support me on my quest for professional development, specifically in the area of program design and conducting assessments? I love it when we hear from somebody who is devoting their life to this and saying, what can I do to be the best of the best?
I do too. I'm very impressed when I read about people like this, and good for you. That's a fantastic thing that you're doing, and thank you for asking us for guidance.
Yeah, good for all of us.
It's very nice. So I'm not in any way to want to toot my own horn, but I think that the book that we finished last year is a pretty comprehensive review of all the different areas of ABA. I would highly recommend it for you as a BCBA. I think it turned out a little bit too technical. It doesn't go into all the extreme technicalities of ABA, but it is kind of technical for parents maybe. But perfect for BCBA. I would really recommend you read it, although I have heard a lot of parents like it as well.
I was going to say, I've been hearing from parents that they really love it. They're just not reading it cover to cover, which I think is what a BCBA would do. What I'm hearing from the parents is that they're going to the section that they want to know the most about, and then reading around that section and skipping around and finding it really helpful.
I love the chapters that we picked. I mean, so it's called Evidence-Based Treatments for Children with Autism, and you can get it on Amazon. It's really, it's good in that it has a very broad perspective. I mean, it'll talk to you about everything from, all the treatment of challenging behaviors, skill acquisition, assessment, just philosophical stuff about autism, how to grow a practice, like anything you can imagine is in there. So I would recommend that. And since you're very interested in program design and assessment, I would highly recommend Skills, which is skillsforautism.com. And that's our curriculum and assessment also for skill assessments, basically. And if you familiarize yourself with that website, you will really learn a lot about content. I love a BCBA asking this question because it's one of the things I feel is really lacking in our field. It's gotten better and it's gradually getting better, but most of the emphasis in training as a BCBA has to do with learning the techniques, which of course are extremely important, identifying how to learning how to identify functions of behaviors and the importance of reinforcement and shaping and all of those different types of techniques that we use, as well as, of course, the kind of protocols like discrete trial and NET and so on and so forth. But there's not a lot of emphasis on content. And by content, I mean, once you know the procedures for changing behavior, whether it's reducing challenging behavior or increasing deficient behavior skills like language and increasing social skills and so on and so forth, you need to kind of know how to do that, what order to do that, what's the hierarchy, how do you teach a new skill. You might know the technique, you might know really well how to do a fluency program or a DTT or NET or anything errorless or whatever it is, but that's just procedure. It doesn't tell you how to take a non-verbal child and teach them sounds and then teach them words and then build on the words into sentences and descriptors and build their language to the point that they're talking normally within a few years. So there's hundreds of steps really involved in that. The easy way to say it is taking a child from, let's say, verbal imitation all the way to conversational skills. So that's quite a lot to teach, as well as also the same type of hierarchy and process exists for all these other areas, not just language, obviously, for social skills. Teaching a child who is completely involved with his or her own behavior and is very egocentric, and getting that child to the point where they're not only paying attention to others, but reading others' social behavior is quite a task. So Skills is really very, very good at that. It has hundreds and hundreds of lessons, and it kind of has organized them hierarchically and has tells you what's a prerequisite to what, and has thousands of SDs or instructions in there. So if you want to teach a child, let's say, just, labeling, it'll take you through step by step. I think just the object program, which is just basic labeling, is 40 somewhat SDs. So it takes you step by step, and it teaches you how to break everything down, which is the key to ABA, and teach it individually and step by step and clearly. So I would really highly recommend Skills. In terms of conducting assessments, as a BCBA, you're talking about functional behavior assessments, and that, of course, is also covered in our book. There are many other, the Cooper and Heron book for autism, for ABA, of course, I forget the exact title, but in the field of behavior analysis, everybody knows it as the Cooper and Heron book, is a very good book for just the concepts of ABA. And I think that would be very useful to you. Our book is more related to autism particularly, and the application of ABA to autism.
So, as a parent, I want to say to this person, why not apply for a job at CARD?
Well, of course, we'd love to have you. I don't know where this location that you've mentioned exactly, how far it is from one of our offices. I know where it is, but I don't know how far you would be from us. And I don't know what the need is out there. Thank you for bringing that up, Shannon, because one of the things we are doing is we're expanding pretty rapidly, and we are not only acquiring smaller companies, but we're hiring BCBAs in all of the different locations, putting you through all of our training, and then kind of doing a model where you open a site in your area, but it's a CARD site. So we would very much welcome that. If you are interested in that, please give your email information to Shannon, and she'll forward it to me, and I will get it to our expansion group here at CARD, and they will be in touch and take you through that. We've been very successful at that. One of our centers that's growing pretty fast is the Henderson one, and that was a acquisition actually of a smaller group that we retrained, and we love them. From what I've heard, they're fabulous people already. Supervisors who are very, very highly qualified to begin with, and doing fantastically well with our program. So.
And, I have had an opportunity to go in and see some of the case manager training and that they put people through, and it is amazing.
It's very intense.
I think when you're talking about program design, if you want to be with the creme de la creme and learn program design, that's the training you want to be in.
And thanks for saying that, because it made me realize, the folks who do most of our CM training are what we call our supervisors case managers until they pass a series of exams. It's a pretty comprehensive training here at CARD. It's several months. It involves class time and then practicum and oral exams, written exams. It's like a massive amount of stuff. You really learn quite a lot during this period of training. And what I wanted to say is that the people who do that for us are our IBT group, Institute for Behavioral Training, and they are, they used to be senior supervisors here at CARD, and they are, of course, very, very experienced behavior analysts who've been in the field for many, many years and are fabulous teachers. And we just love them, and they do a very good job with training our folks. So of course we'd love to add you. We just did a training about a month ago, I think, or maybe a month and a half ago, and there was at least 25 people in there. And the next training that's coming up, I believe next week.
I believe it is, yes.
Is over 20 people again. So we're training a lot of supervisors right now. We'd love to be able to do that for you.
Wonderful. And in a side note, we just had somebody comment that they had been asking us questions from Puerto Rico, if you remember. And they wrote in and said, just to let you know, I finished the RBT training and test, so I plan to start working with the kiddo in 2 weeks. We filled the skills questionnaire and the BIP, and I'm going to start supervision next week.
See, that's fabulous.
Isn't that amazing?
I love that. Even if it's just one person, they're going to change a lot of lives.
Yep.
And I love that they're using our product. So that's kind of the dream for me, was that we would be able to touch the world through these various things, And our IBT group has developed hundreds of trainings. I do recommend anyone who's interested in learning more about ABA go on their website, which is Institute for Behavioral Training. I think their website is ibehavioraltraining.com.
Yes.
and they are fantastically talented clinicians, and they have produced training modules that are basic to advanced, everything you need to know from assessment to teaching to acquisition to challenging behavior, you name it, it's on there. For all levels of professionals, teachers, parents, you name it, it's all on there. It's very, very good stuff. So, and of course, becoming an RBT is fantastic.
It's
Using
amazing.
skills is awesome. It's all very good.
Well, I'll tell you, I got emotional because autism just changed in Puerto Rico because you did this.
Love that.
And
I
it's
love that.
endless because education, no one can ever take away from you. So you're going to share this for years to come. Si se puede. You know what I always say. We can do this. Okay. So I want to go to a question that somebody wrote in about the gluten-free diet. Here we are. Okay. Has going gluten-free and casein-free helped anyone who has not complained of tummy problems? And I think it's a really good question. We talk about this diet and the fact that there are many diets. And in fact, we are going to have Julie Matthews on again coming up very soon, talking about these kinds of things. And gluten-free, casein-free is one of the diets that we talk about. And there are some people that report, good things from it, other people who report nothing. But this is a great question. Has it ever helped somebody who wasn't already complaining of tummy problems? And you've treated more people than anyone else. You're the ideal person to ask.
Sure. I like this question because it is a perspective that I had not taken before, which is, of course, as a parent, you wonder if it's only appropriate to do this if your child is complaining of tummy problems. But the truth is that the answer is yes, it does help, even if your child is not complaining, in my opinion. And it doesn't always help, but it's not necessarily correlated to whether or not your child's complaining of tummy problems, and I'll explain why. So if you have a lot of gastrointestinal inflammation, then you probably are complaining about tummy aches or pain or so on. And then, yes, the diet may help. Your GI inflammation may not have anything to do with gluten or casein, so it may also not help. But the reason that gluten and casein-free diets tend to have any kind of effect is basically our body is not able to break down the peptides associated with those types of products. So when you eat something that has the protein of gluten, which is the protein in various whole grains, or casein, which is the protein in dairy, then you should be breaking it down to peptides, which are chains of amino acids. And then from there, you should be breaking it down to amino acids, which are what the body will be able to absorb and use, which is basically the nutrition for the body. Now, if you're not able to, then those chains of amino acids, the peptide chains of gluten and casein, tend to give the brain, they will have the same kind of effect as an endorphin. So they kind of make you feel a little bit loopy and a little bit high, sort of like, euphoric and out of. So they're opiates, exactly same kind of effect as an opiate. So that is what. So when you remove that from the body, when you remove those peptide chains, you are essentially giving the brain an opportunity to wake up. It doesn't have that kind of opioid type effect. It doesn't necessarily feel all kind of out of it and so on. And so it allows the brain to wake up. And so, of course, that will be beneficial to most children who have any kind of problem with paying attention or, distractibility and so on, which is a common part of autism. So to answer your question, it may affect your child. I feel it's worth trying. We generally have no milk in our house. We do not drink milk, and we never have since the kids were little, and since the casein whole concept of casein-free, and I studied it and learned about it. I basically removed milk. It made a big difference in my kids' lives. My son had major dark rings, which immediately went away, and his appetite opened, and he started eating all kinds of stuff after that. And in terms of gluten, my kids have more or less put themselves on gluten-free. They're not completely free, but they are pretty avoidant of gluten wherever possible, especially my daughters. And I avoid gluten as much as possible. I have not had casein in years. I can't digest casein at all. So personally, I don't think it's associated necessarily with mental disabilities or problems of such as autism. I think it's a health matter, and that's a bigger discussion because, in my opinion, we've gone to so much genetically modified food in this country that most of it is not real, and so we are prone to not being able to digest these GMO foods. So I would say it is worth trying, and you can see what I always tell parents is with casein and gluten, you just do them one at a time first of all, and then give it like 2 or 3 weeks of time to just see an effect. Especially with gluten, casein tends to have a reaction faster, but just remove it from the diet and see if your child is doing better. That's probably the best way to go.
You've reminded me that when there was a period of time in our therapy where we had on our team, there were 2 therapists who they had some sort of a agreement that they were going to try the gluten-free, casein-free diet just to see what it was like so that they would know what their kiddos were going through. They were both on our case. One was male, one was female, and they had different reasons for wanting to do it, but the mutual reason was we're going to see what it's like. And it was fascinating to watch the 2 of them go on the diet. Before we were done, the guy found out that he had celiac.
Oh, wow.
So he had to stay on it. But both of them went on the diet, and both of them said, I just feel clearer.
Yeah.
As if, you know how if you wear glasses and
Totally.
the doctor puts the pair of glasses on, you go, whoa, is that what the world looks like? I didn't know.
Yeah.
That's what they both felt like, that they just were seeing the world sharper, that they were sharper, they felt better. And that was fascinating to me.
Yeah, it's really, initially it's hard, Shannon, because we have come to see food as a reinforcer rather than as a nutritional source, and what we do is we tend to, it's very hard if you, 20 years ago when people started talking about this, it was way harder than it is now.
Oh,
I mean, now you can go anywhere and get gluten-free or casein-free, and honestly, it doesn't really taste all that much different.
Right.
So I highly recommend it. When I started drinking almond milk instead of milk, initially it was kind of like, whoa, this is weird. But now I can't even handle the taste of milk, like real milk, and I just go with almond milk. I love the taste of almond milk now. So you get used to it, and it is so much better in a lot of ways.
I've been gluten-free forever because I'm mildly allergic to wheat. I don't have like a huge reaction, but I'll break out in hives. And then now, just the last 2 years, I'm allergic to milk. I still miss it.
Do you miss it?
I'm just going to be
honest.
honest.
Have you tried other milks?
I have, and I know everybody tells me you're going to get used to it. I don't think so. It all tastes like chalk to me. Just keeping it real. I still miss a nice tall glass of organic whole milk. Are you kidding me?
I know.
There's
My
nothing
son
that
is
can
the
replace
same.
that.
He's like craves a whole milk.
Yeah, and I want some yogurt. I want whole milk yogurt someday. We were going to come back to a question about what is the connection between seizures and autism.
Yeah, and that's a really great question. There should be some statistics on the percentage of children with autism who have seizures. Obviously, there are individuals who have seizures and have nothing like autism going on. There's a higher percentage, there's a higher correlation of autism and seizures. I'm trying to think what it is now. I don't know exactly because it changes all the time. Seizures, as we know, there are many different types of seizures. There are petite seizures, grand mal seizures. There are different types of seizures, and of course, the seizure activity is in different locations. There are some people who have seizures in their temporal lobe, others who have it in their prefrontal cortex. The location, and in some cases, it's not even focal, it's generalized seizure, and we can't tell exactly because it's affecting the whole brain. So seizures, there are many different types of seizures, and you can have seizures with or without autism, and of course you can have autism with or without seizures. However, there seems to be a higher correlation with autism than in the normal population, the typical population. So something about autism tends to correlate highly with seizures. Now, that being said, it's a very low percentage of children that I have who actually develop seizures. Sometimes the children, most of the time I think children who have autism and develop seizures, it doesn't happen until past the age of 10. It's later that they develop seizures. it can become severe. I find personally that seizure activity mirrors the autism severity level. If you have very severe autism, you might end up having very severe seizures, and so on. As we know about seizures, many forms of seizures are highly influenced by what we eat. Diets have a lot to do with controlling seizures. Most of the time we think only medication can control seizures, whereas most people with seizures are on specialized diets. And so it would make sense, obviously, that if you have if you are eating foods that you're not able to digest, which kind of goes with the previous question, it might have some causation or correlation to having seizures. The other aspect of it is that obviously, if you are going to be, the brain of the autistic individual, I often say some parts of it are functioning in overdrive, and other parts of it are not really functioning the way that it should. So, for instance, people who have problems with executive functions, their prefrontal cortex is not really working the way that it should, or we know that a lot of children who have aggressive behaviors, it's because of overactivity in their temporal lobes and so on. So when your brain is kind of skewed or unbalanced in the sense that some parts are working harder than other parts or so on, then that in itself could lead to seizure activity, because there's a lack of balance in the brain biochemistry. So beyond that, this would be a good question to ask Dr. Copeland when you have her here, because I wonder if the biochemical imbalances that we see in autism are the same that would lead to seizure activity. I don't know the answer to that, and it is entirely possible.
Interesting. Okay. But it is an area that there's more and more research being done on as we see more and more kids. And we did cover yesterday that there's a study being done in Hawaii, Honolulu, in conjunction with the Shriners, looking at the diet that you were talking about that gets used a lot with seizures, the ketogenic diet, looking at that just with autism to see what benefits that it has. And we're looking forward to having those results come out in the future. Okay, another question here. Somebody wants to know, is it possible to have apraxia but not have autism?
Yes, and that's a great question, a fast one we can answer. The answer is yes. Apraxia is generally, if you, I guess the late way I explain it, or the easy way to explain it, is just low muscle tone in the tongue. So your tongue is not able to move the way that it does. We don't pay attention to the ways that our tongue moves when we produce sound. It's constant, and it's a million different movements. And apraxia is kind of like it's slower movement, it's not as precise movement of the tongue, and that leads to language delay or language problems. And of course you can have apraxia without having anything to do with autism.
Okay.
And on the other hand, many children with autism have apraxia as well.
Okay. So somebody wrote in and said, are people with Asperger's syndrome in the DSM-5?
Okay, yes, and that's a great question, because, the DSM-5 removed the diagnosis of Asperger's, but really what it did was it included the diagnosis of Asperger's into the ASD diagnosis. And there's two reasons we know this. One is that the reason that prior diagnosis of autism required one of the symptoms to be a delay in language or a disability in language, and the current one does not. And that is simply because of individuals with Asperger's, because individuals with Asperger's generally don't have a speech delay. They may have a delay in language and pragmatic language, but not a speech delay. And so generally speaking, that shows that the intention was to have Asperger's as part of the ASD diagnosis. And then secondly, of course, there's a subtype when you give the diagnosis of ASD now, according to the DSM-5, you say, ASD Asperger's type, which essentially identifies those individuals that are kind of less of a language problem, much more of a social type of issue, which has to do with perspective taking. That's kind of what you see in individuals with Asperger's much more, and less of the repetitive kind of. Individuals with Asperger's have repetitive behaviors, but they're of a high level. They're not the typical repetitive motor mannerisms or stereotypies that we see with individuals with autism. The repetitive stuff that we see with Asperger's is mostly what I call obsessive compulsive type behavior, which has to more do, I think, with anxiety rather than anything else.
Okay.
So yes, they are covered under ASD
and that's
in
such a good
DSM-5.
thing to know, because I think a lot of people have felt bereft and felt like they were in no man's land.
Absolutely.
And this language is in a way that, it's still included. It's just
named
categorized
differently. Yes.
Okay, moving on. Somebody wrote in and said, "Thank you, Dr. Doreen. Do you know if swimming helps our kids? And thanks again."
Yes, I thank you for watching. I believe there are many children, not all. I mean, first of all, there's no harm in swimming. Obviously, it's helpful to everyone because it's a sport. But whether it specifically helps our children, I personally would tend to say yes. I think a lot of my children have sensory issues. Not everyone, but a lot of the children have sensory dysregulation. And swimming is one of those amazing activities where you are surrounded by a pool of water which actually exerts pressure. And that sense of pressure, I think a lot of people feel it grounds them, it centers them, it helps them regulate their sensory input more. So I highly recommend swimming as a physical activity that also works on the sensory needs of the child.
And I also want to throw in that we know that the leading cause of death for individuals who are on the autism spectrum is drowning.
That's right.
And that if everyone within the sound of our voices would make sure that
Yes.
their children on the autism spectrum got swimming lessons, we could change that dramatically.
Yes.
We know when kids elope, that frequently they elope to water, and if they don't know how to
terrible.
help themselves, and they can be taught how to swim and how to stay afloat so that these things don't happen. So please, there are grants available through organizations to get swimming lessons. Take advantage of it so that we can change those numbers.
That's right. That's such a very, very devastating and sad fact, but it is true. I've actually personally had a few families here who've unfortunately encountered that, and yes, it is very possible for us to teach the children how to swim. In fact, we do swimming programs with our kids, and it is a life-saving intervention. Absolutely.
And good for them physically as well. They want to know, what does CARD look for when hiring therapists? Love this question, because we need a group of people who are trained in this, right?
Yeah, and we are recruiting very, very rapidly. We are often, I guess we are constantly trying to hit the needs or meet the needs of all of our families on our wait lists. I hate to have a wait list. I'm trying very hard to hire enough therapists to be able to help all the families. But it is difficult because not every therapist passes what we expect, and not every therapist then passes their training and their exams. So what we look for when hiring, quite honestly, is dictated more or less by the state that you are in. In California, for instance, currently the criteria for becoming a therapist is nothing. There's a high school diploma. You don't even need a high school diploma, really. What you need is to have no criminal history. So we definitely will do FBI clearance and fingerprinting in order to make sure that the individual doesn't have criminal history. Other than that, there is no other requirement. There are some other states where they require a slightly higher level, but not really. I mean, most states are at the therapist level. The requirement is just to have a high school diploma and a certain number of hours of intervention, which really they don't even consider. I mean, like babysitting an individual with disabilities qualifies as the experience. So, that's fine. That helps us in terms of recruiting people. But then giving them the experience and the training is the most important part of it. What I personally like to look for in therapists is I personally like to look for people who are energetic, who are committed, dedicated to this field. Most of the time I find those are people who are like, somehow they have a family member, maybe a sibling with a disability, and they're just interested, genuinely interested in helping. I try to avoid people who are egocentric and are here to better their own lives in some way, careers, career oriented. This is a very giving field. You have to be a giver. You cannot be a taker in this world. So that's all. You don't need anything else as long as you're kind of energetic and creative. People tend to do very well. The training we do is pretty intensive. We put them through a series of kind of online classwork, which has to do with just the theory of ABA and the practice of ABA and all the different basic theories of protocols of how you do ABA. And then we have a period, I think that's about 2 weeks long, of what we call overlaps and training. So the therapist is scheduled to work with children, and another therapist is with them who's senior and teaches them and models and so on and so forth. And they have to pass a written test and then a practicum field exam, what we call it. Now, we have a lot of parents who do not want to allow the therapist to overlap on their child. I understand that because, of course, we don't want to waste any time, but it is the parents' kind of contribution to the field to allow us to have some overlaps on their cases, because that's teaching new people. And then, of course, I know that parents are very hesitant to allow some new therapists on their cases, but the truth is it really has to do with the individual, and there are some really talented new folks out there. Like, they're brand new to the field, but they're just really natural and talented. And if you don't allow them to work with your child, they won't stay in this field. So
yeah, I think personally, as a parent, I was told by the parent who told me to come to CARD, she said, when it happens, they're going to want to train people and you're going to go, oh, I don't want that. And she was like, you would be crazy. You would be crazy to turn that down, and here are the reasons why.
That's nice.
You'll get to see the people who are coming in, and you'll get to know who are the up and coming. So when you talk to the scheduler and go, oh, I'd like so-and-so, you'll know what you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
And she said, your kid is going to have to do something called generalization. I didn't know what that was when she was talking about it, but she said, trust me, you're going to get used to a certain therapist. Your child's going to get used to that therapist, and we do it this way. And that's not what you want. You want a bunch of different therapists, and some people who come in and do it wrong, because that's what's going to teach your kid the most.
That's right.
And she said, and you will learn the most, because you can always do more parent training. Listen when they're training the new therapist, so that you're learning while they're teaching that person.
Fantastic.
And that helped me immensely. So to all you parents who don't want to have the new therapist, rearrange your thought process.
Great feedback. That's fabulous, and thanks to her for saying all that.
Yes, because I wouldn't have known.
Well, it's all true, and as a parent, we tend to just shy away from, oh no, I want someone with more experience.
Yeah.
But the truth is, it's just as important to have people who are just they're brand new trainees, because the rest of the world is not trained ABA,
And your teachers that you're going to go into the classroom,
Exactly.
my child will say to them, look, it's better if you do it this way,
Exactly.
or he'll language it and realize, okay, what they meant was this. Because if you just set them up to only work well with therapists, that's not what we're going for.
That's exactly right.
So use that, but apply for jobs. It's a great job to have.
And if you're a parent listening, help us find good therapists. Yes. Some of the people, Shannon, I am recruiting people from all over the place. Like yesterday, where was I yesterday with my kids? At the airport. Okay, at night I'm taking.
You're famous for recruiting people. You have an
I know,
eye.
it's fine. Well, because it's just. Everybody does, really, if you think about it. So we were at a restaurant at LAX, and there are very few restaurants that are before security, and
right.
So this was a restaurant in the international terminal downstairs, and it was like, this guy was amazing. This waiter, he was just handling the entire group. Like, there was maybe, 20 tables there. He was handling them and the bar. I mean, he was just incredible. And he came to us, and there was 5 of us, and we ordered food, and he didn't even write it down. He repeated it exactly, and I mean, so this is kind of a talented guy. He got us in and out of there in 30 minutes. It was pretty impressive, and that's the kind of guy I recruit. Because
so did you recruit him?
Yeah, of course, because they're just the type of people who are. No matter what you're doing, they are bringing excellence to it. And I love that type of person. They take pride in what it is they're doing, and just being the best at that. And that's the type of person that's going to be successful no matter what. And I'd love to have them here at CARD.
Absolutely. Love it. Okay, moving on. Another question here. Dr. Doreen, thank you. You're amazing. Watching your show has changed the way I look at my child. Now I know when he does weird stuff, there's a reason. My question is, how can I afford ABA if my insurance is self-funded? I hear the things you say and I want to give my son this chance. How does a person afford it?
Yeah, it's so sad when I hear these things. I mean, I think self-insured companies have to really consider this. What I would do is depending on the number of employees that are in your organization, I would try to recruit others who have children affected with autism or other types of areas that are not covered. And then I would, maybe you can start some sort of list. You would have to go talk to your HR department. They would then have to talk to the owners of the company. It is a matter of choice to elect this option as a coverage. And it does not cost anything almost. I know that when we elected it for our employees, I think it was something like 10 cents more per individual. That no one else really feels it when you add this coverage. It's extremely low cost to everyone, and it is so beneficial to so many people. So I would say probably it's just start by talking to your colleagues, trying to find out if there are others who have the same issue, whether it's autism or another disability that's not covered. I'm assuming you don't have autism. You might not even have mental health. I don't know, but just find out, and go plead with HR and ask, or the owner of the company, and try to get the board or the owners to add this coverage to their policy. That's probably the best way. And then depending on which state you're in, there are other forms of coverage. Obviously, California, of course, has many other forms. In California, if you don't have insurance coverage, you just have to show proof of that to the regional center system, and then they will cover it. If you're in other states, Medicare has coverage for you, so I really recommend that. And school districts also will often provide some form of coverage for this type of help as well.
And if you're at all an advocate, this is the area that they call ERISA laws. And there is a growing group of people that are trying to fight ERISA laws at the federal level. Because
Yes.
if we can change the ERISA laws at the federal level, then that gets rid of this escape for self-funded employers not covering ABA. So give some time and effort to groups that are trying to change that so we can get it changed for everyone.
Yeah, it's pretty shocking when you look at, there are some organizations, from what I hear, that are very large organizations that also promote themselves as caring about the environment and health and green and this and that, and yet they don't have coverage
Yes.
for autism. To me, that just is such irony.
Well,
Yeah.
that's a nice word for it, isn't it? And more of these companies have been, some of them, they've been talked to and said, hey, did you realize you were doing this? Others have been shamed. There are groups that are shaming groups into covering it by saying we're going to, bring together a group of people and boycott what you're doing. But take care of yourself and your child first. I think, one of the best things you can do, as Dr. Granpeesheh was saying, is look at what else is available. Other people have been able to get supplementary insurance while this all gets figured out.
That's right.
But it's a problem.
And the reality is, don't look at it as a problem. Up till 5 years ago, nobody had insurance coverage.
Yeah.
Look at it, just put it aside. I mean, you should try to fix that for yourself on a long-term basis, but there's no reason that is not a reason for you to not have help for your child. Yeah. Up to 5 years ago, anybody who received ABA did not have insurance coverage. So there are many other things you could do, even if you're outside of a state like California where there's a ton of help. We have families who've hired their neighbors and the whole
Yes.
town to come and volunteer and help. So everything is possible.
Watch the Mission Possible that's about Maddie, because her family did it with volunteers from their church. and skills, and the CARD e-learning that it was called then, that's IBT now. So you can do it. You can do it.
Or
Where there's a will, there's a way.
Or watch our recovered video, and Ruffin's family had volunteers from the whole village.
Really? I didn't even know that.
Oh yeah, that
That's
was
amazing.
all people coming and helping, and Evelyn was the one going out there and training them.
Wow, amazing. I want to get on, we're almost out of time here, but can a child after aging out of early intervention possibly receive ABA for more years?
Yes, the answer to that is definitely yes. You may be, I don't know what state you're in, but EI is usually something that's referenced on the East Coast, especially in New York, for instance. If you happen to be in New York, you go from EI to preschool to school aged, and you just continue to receive funding through the state. In all other states, early intervention can be funded for many years past early intervention. Early intervention, the term is referred to as like up to age 5. Generally speaking, you will have coverage way past age 5 from the school district. So please, regardless of where you are, make sure that you pursue it. It should not be ending just after age 3 or 5. Some states are up to age 3 and others are up to age 5 for what they consider EI. It goes on forever.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.